What is up, my fellow Twebbians? I am Logan, the totally epic gamer, and today I got something a little bit different. We're not going through so much of a build video as much of a comparison video. With the fix of Dark Sacrifice, the tier 3 mod that allows you to get up to 75% damage and takes your HP up until about the 50% mark, there's been some new theory crafting going around of what is the best damage mod to grab. So we're going to go over that today, and we're going to focus on the big three that I think everybody's really had some sort of discussion about or feels is really good. We're going to go over Dark Sacrifice, we're going to go over Killing Spree, and we're going to go over Embalmer's Rage, which is this one here. They all have their own little spot in the meta. I know which one I prefer, but I'm going to go through all of them individually and say where they fit. There is not a, one situation fits all. This one's the best no matter what. Each one has its own little caveat of where it fits into the meta, and that's what we're going to kind of go through here. So first off, we're going to be looking at some gameplay using the Embalmer's Rage mod. And you'll see that I'm on Marshland Caverns, and that's for good reason. Perforas generally are the hardest ones to crit. Sometimes people feel really good about critting them. The Broodmother's not so bad, and some of the Maulers and the Behemoths are easier to crit, but generally speaking, the crits are hardest to come by on Perforas. So what I decided was to show some gameplay using Embalmer's Rage on some Perforas. Now, you can see it's going pretty well. I'm getting a lot of good crits here. There's some that aren't crits. The damage is a little bit lower than I normally get when I use Dark Sacrifice or Killing Spree, but overall it's quite comparable. On top of that, Embalmer's Rage is actually proccing my Wrath of Moloch, which is something that only procs when I crit. So I'm actually getting a lot of additional damage from my Inferno Seed on the Wrath of Moloch, and you'll see that at the end of the show when it goes damage dealt, and you can see how much Wrath of Moloch does. It's actually quite substantially different than it would normally be on other mods. However, the one thing that's kind of bad about Embalmer's Rage is that there's a certain distance at which you can't crit, and that's based on the distance of the gun. So this gun goes quite far, but even at some of the farther enemies, I won't get the crit despite having Embalmer's Rage actually procced, and you'll see it in some of these clips here. On top of that, Embalmer's Rage has the caveat that you need to be able to get a kill in the first section, right? And that's a hard caveat. Generally, whenever there's a caveat to a mod, it's something that's a little bit harder to perform and something you should kind of have to work around. And generally when there's a mod like that, it's something you want to stay away from. In Embalmer's Rage's case, it's still very good. And when paired with something like Gravedigger's Frenzy or Wrath of Moloch, you can get some really good returns from getting a lot of critical strikes. Now, farther than that, do I think Embalmer's Rage is really good on a Technomancer? No, not particularly. And what it really comes down to is that with Killing Spree and Dark Sacrifice, I can generally hit this damage without crits, so the crits become less useful to me. Now, when it comes to a Trickster, though, where you're doing a lot of damage from behind and up close range, it's a lot harder to get a critical strike, so Embalmer's Rage can actually do a lot more. And what I mean by that is, when I'm running Killing Spree and Dark Sacrifice, I can still get critical shots, And there you kind of saw that I wasn't getting crits, and part of the reason was he was just at a little bit of a tough distance. And I can still get crits, which means that it's only useful when I'm going to have a harder time getting crits in the first place. And you see I had a pretty good time there, looking at the damage dealt. Wrath of Moloch did about 20 million damage, which is much higher than you're about to see when we go through the other two mods. But it's harder, to justify using Embalmer's Rage when the crits are easier to get, because overall I'm just losing 75% damage. If I'm already pretty much getting crits most times, then why would I have to worry about getting guaranteed critical shots? And here you can see I'm actually going through Chemplant with Killing Spree this time. And the reason I'm doing Chemplant with Killing Spree and not Dark Sacrifice is because of all the changes to armor and emergency stance being fixed. It's a little bit easier to die now. Now, Dark Sacrifice has the caveat that you start taking damage, and when you're just walking around. And Killing Spree does not have that caveat, and there's a lot of enemies to replenish your cooldown on your Killing Spree, so you do not have to worry about there being a lack of enemies, not getting enough stacks or anything like that. There's no difficulty there, and as you can see, it's very easy for me to keep my stacks up, doing good damage, really just tearing through this first portion and moving on to the next portion. So this is when killing spree is going to be really vital, is when you're going to be very close to death, you can't afford the HP loss, and you're going to need to worry about it, especially in this room right here. Dark Sacrifice has got me killed in this room many a time, because I will have to take cover for a second, regroup and find my bearings, and I'm already losing 50% of my HP because Dark Sacrifice is taken away from me. And Dark Sacrifice isn't giving me any additional that Killing Frenzy wouldn't have already given me. Killing Frenzy does the same damage, you know, very comparable. They're both at 75% at cap. But the caveat of not being able to kill somebody with Killing Spree is not apparent here. There's many enemies and there's lots to do, and Dark Sacrifice will hold you back in a scenario like this, whereas Killing Spree will push forward. Now, in a scenario where you can't really find a way to keep your Killing Spree up, you know, a good example is the end of Yagak, when you have to fight Yagak himself in Eye of the Storm. There's no way to proc your Killing Spree until the Reavers are done. And the Reavers are not easy to kill. You kind of already want that 75% damage boost. So that's when Killing Spree is less useful. There's not 100% uptime. Again, much like Embalmer's Rage, it has that caveat that you need to be finding kills to get the procs. And because of that, that's where it kind of falters and where it can shake up a little bit. But overall, things like this, Mountain Outpost is another great example. Even Marshland Caverns isn't a terrible example because there's so many enemies where Dark Sacrifice might get you into trouble, but Killing Spree won't, because it's not just passively taking your HP from you, and there's lots of enemies to satisfy the requirement of guaranteeing that you get a kill. And here you're going to see just a little caveat, not much to do with the mod, but there's a part of Chemplant that people have, you know, have started to learn, and especially now. This has an absolute 40-second timer on it, right? And so what I mean by that is the elevator is going to open. You'll be able to step into the elevator after 40 seconds. And if you kill the enemies before that, you will actually be able to get in sooner. So you see I'm actually not at the 40-second timer yet, about to get the last kill. Right as I get it, door opens. That's just a little extra little tidbit. You know, I like to share some bits and pieces. Now, this is a part where Killing Spree is less effective. Right as the Broodmother spawns, I want to kill the Broodmother, right? Because I don't want to get jumped, I don't want to get, you know, thrown off, and I don't want to just get instant killed. And there, you know, it's still a very fast kill, but my gear is very high. I would have done better in that situation with Dark Sacrifice, and I could have maybe stopped. You see how I had to do a quick turnaround, not had to do that quick turnaround on those enemies, and chanced getting killed there. So that's a situation where I would have wanted Dark Sacrifice over Killing Spree, but, you know, it's just a part of a scenario. Killing Spree is much better for the rest of Chemplant, and that's why I would recommend Killing Spree in a situation like this over Embalmer's Rage or Dark Sacrifice. Now, in the final portion, we're going to be getting into, and here you can see the damage dealt. Wrath of Moloch did half the damage that I did on Embalmer's Rage, which is just exemplifying, you know, when you have crit stacking and extra mods that work with crit, that Embalmer's Rage will obviously be much better. But going into Dark Sacrifice, this has actually been my favorite mod as of late. It's best when paired with Expedition, where you don't feel like you're going to be getting pushed too often. You feel like you're going to have the damage to complete the task. And you can see I'm doing quite a lot of damage here. You know, I feel very comfortable. And the big reason is I'm playing obviously on Coliseum. It's one directional, and I talk about this a lot on my stream, is that when you're looking at expeditions and how you want to run the expedition, you have to think about how the enemies attack you. This is very Perfora heavy, or there's, you know, some human monsters, but they're all melee for the most part, except for the destroyers, the Kang's enforcers, but those are less of a problem. And the reason that it's, you know, kind of good for you is that when you have melee enemies with Dark Sacrifice, you have a long time for them to get to you. You have a good amount of time for Dark Sacrifice to build up and start doing that high amounts of damage. So you're in a position to not take damage and deal a lot of damage. And this is the perfect mix for Dark Sacrifice. Dark Sacrifice has the caveat that it's going to take damage from you. So if you are having a lot of trouble staying alive and healing, you are not to be running Dark Sacrifice, right? This is Dark Sacrifice is for people that feel like, oh, I want to get rid of the requirement to get kills. I don't want that to be something that I have to look after. I just want to start blasting people right away. And here, of course, you know, I could have kept Killing Spree up this whole time and it would have been a-okay. But on a situation like this, Killing Spree would drop, right as the cutscene starts, Killing Spree drops, and then you have to redo it. But not Dark Sacrifice. No, I just pop this, and suddenly I'm doing back up to max damage, and I'm good to go. And so that's why I prefer Dark Sacrifice in this kind of situation. And here you can see that it's omnidirectional. You think that, oh, well, you know, Logan, you just said if it's omnidirectional, you kind of want Killing Spree so that you don't take so much damage. But as I also said, when there's a long distance between you and them, Dark Sacrifice is going to be better. It's going to be up all the time. You're not too worried about the start of the fight, and since they can't really get to you very quickly, you have a lot of time and availability to control your surroundings and really make sure that you don't die while you do Dark Sacrifice. So that's the gist of it. Those are the 3 mods. I wanted you guys to get a really good feel of what was going on, and you can see I just do some absolute terror damage there. But it's really up to you. How do you play? What are you working on? And just to keep these things in mind, if you're dying a lot, maybe Dark Sacrifice isn't for you. That little bit of HP it takes, sometimes it rounds you down to 9k HP. It's a big deal. And if you don't have the minions to kill, like in the end of Yagak, Killing Spree is not going to help you, and Embalmer Rage is not going to help you. So it's important to remember that these 3 mods are great in their own aspect, but they all have their different parts to be best. And you can see Wrath of Moloch did not do a lot of damage there, and that's just one of the shows that Embalmer's Rage can be really good to proc your crits for you, and if you're not getting the crits, maybe you're going to lose out on some damage. But that's all for today. Thanks for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, hit the like button, hit that subscribe. It helps me out a lot, and have a great rest of your day.